India and Ireland are celebrating 75th year of their diplomatic relationship. This is a relationship which has seen high-level engagement. With me is the Irish ambassador to New Delhi, Kevin Kelly. So welcome to WION.
Thank you very much.
And my first question, an obvious question, starting with the easier questions, is of course, how do you see this relationship as?
Well, I hope they'll all be easy questions. But look, we have a great relationship with India. We've ever since the founding of this nation and our own struggle for freedom from Britain, our leadership talk to each other, they plan together. So we have a very proud history in terms of the anti-colonial struggle. So like you said, we're celebrating 75 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. We were one of the first countries to recognize, and our leadership had very close ties, you know, between some of your former leaders like Bose and Nehru, with our own leadership, De Valera. They were swapping notes, their diplomats were in different countries. And in fact, one of the things I'm very proud about is that the great Indian constitution actually borrows some language from our own Irish constitution. So a little country on the far side of Europe has in some way found its reflection in the great Indian constitution. So we have a proud history, but in fact we have a long history of engagement. Many of the schools that were in this country were initially set up by Irish missionary nuns and priests. Now a lot of those missionaries have passed on, they're either in old age, and now they're led by a young generation of Indian leadership, which is so great to see. And you can go to so many schools around the country, and even though they're proudly Indian, there's a small flavour of Ireland in those schools. So our relationship is going from strength to strength.
Any initiatives are you looking at in this year, which is the 75th year? I believe that you're going to play an important role in the Durga Puja, which is going to start in West Bengal.
Yes, well, we have a number of initiatives planned for this year. We have a lecture series. We've had, as you said, some high-level visitors. But for me, and we'll finish off the year with a very big event in Mumbai and Delhi, where we're bringing a very celebrated Irish musical artist over. But for me, one of the crowning parts of this year was what's going to happen in Kolkata for the amazing Durga Puja festival. And the story of that is, I had just arrived here. I'm just here slightly less than a year, but one of the first things I went to was the Durga Puja festival. It blew my mind. I had never experienced anything like this. Of course, it started as a religious festival, but now it's one of the biggest public art festivals in the world. And I'm really delighted that because of our 75th anniversary, we have managed to foster a partnership between a very well-known Kolkata-based cultural group called Bahala Nuttall Dal, and with a very famous Irish group from Galway, from the west part of Ireland, called Macnas. Macnas is known in Ireland for, they do amazing street theatre, puppetry, for St. Patrick's Day, our national day, for the Galway Arts Festival. They're the people who produce these amazing crafts. So we have managed to bring these artists together, and they are going to produce a joint Irish-India pandal in Calcutta, which will be launching on the 1st of October. So it's a very exciting initiative. This is going to be something absolutely huge, and it will celebrate the mystic feminine of both the Hindu goddess Durga, and then the Irish Celtic goddess Danu. And so we're making cultural parallels between both. So we're very excited about that collaboration.
It's a unique cultural initiative between two countries, but essentially Indians in Ireland, talking about the diaspora bit, you had leaders who were Indian origin.
Yes.
You have a significant population of Indians and Indian origin people as well. So if you can talk about, shed some light as to the role they are playing in your society.
Well, actually, you know, not many people know, but almost 2% of our population are now Indian. We have almost 100,000 Indians living in Ireland. It's, I think, the fourth largest population of Indians within the European Union. And in terms of students, we've got about 10,000 Indians coming to study every year in Ireland, which I think is the second highest in Europe after Germany. So the Indian community in Ireland is playing a hugely positive contribution. I mean, in a whole range of sectors. So very much in the professions, in the health profession, doctors, surgeons, neurosurgeons, cardiologists, nurses. You can't go into an Irish hospital without being treated by an Indian medical professional. But also in a whole range of other sectors, in tech, in pharma. So what is really good is that we have a very nice program where when Indian students come to visit Ireland to study, once they graduate, they're entitled to a 2-year work permit with a master's degree. So many of them choose to stay. And of course we love when they come back, and I have a very exciting initiative about trying to get those Indians when they come back to this country, that we want to maintain a connection with Ireland. But many of them stay and they contribute to our economy, or many of them go on to America or other parts of Europe. So we're very proud of our engagement with the Indian community. It's very strong in Ireland. And as you said, diaspora is so important for Ireland. I
was coming to that point. There are parallels when it comes to the large Indian diaspora and the large Irish diaspora, including a lot of leaders from US who are Irish origin.
The current president, Joe Biden, says he's Irish before he's American. We've got something like 25 to 30 million Americans. When they fill in their census forms, they say that they're Irish American. Now, it's not that they all have passports or citizenship, but they have those roots and those connections. So, yeah, we have a huge diaspora. It's very, very important for us. We call them the global Irish because they contribute to our society. We've attracted huge amounts of American foreign direct investment. That's why our economy is doing very, very well. And many of those big companies, Apple, Google, it's Irish people who are working in those companies who also foster that link with Ireland. So we have a minister for diaspora, we have a diaspora strategy. And like I said, we're trying to do our little bit here in India as well.
So in White House, we have an Irish origin president and an Indian origin vice president.
Yes, so there's another connection between our countries, absolutely.
Correct, sir. But essentially talking about the strategic bit between India and Ireland, what are you looking at in terms of the relationship? Are you looking at a strategic partnership? We heard that the focus is also on joint commission meetings as well, if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, so since I've arrived here in the last year, there's a real renewed interest. We have a new Asia-Pacific strategy, and as part of that strategy, in the past, perhaps there was a very large focus on China. Now the emphasis has switched, and there's much more attention being paid to growing our relationship with India. It's already quite healthy. We've about 10 billion euros in two-way trade between the two countries, but we really believe we can do much more. So we have proposed to the government here a joint economic commission. We want to have much more political visits. We have invited Her Excellency, the President of India, to visit Ireland. I had hoped selfishly that it would happen this year on our 75th anniversary, but there was a lot of different events, such as the elections here, so I'm still hoping, and every time I meet with my counterparts in the government here, I'm encouraging that visit to take place. So I really feel that there's a lot more we can do, both in terms of trade, in terms of political links, and also in terms of these people-to-people links that we're talking about.
So you mentioned about Ireland's Asia-Pacific policy, but you have a new Asia-Pacific policy, but what's your idea about the Indo-Pacific? Because this is a concept which is backed by several countries, and India is the most vocal of the supporter when it comes to the Indo-Pacific policy.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said to you, in the past our strategy may have been overly focused on the relationship with China. Now we want to have a much broader set of relationships. And I think that there's a growing recognition, not just by Ireland, by the way, but by the EU and by other countries about the important role that India plays, partly because of its size and its huge population, partly because of its growing economy. It's shortly going to become the third largest economy in the world. And therefore the influence that India can have both in terms of security and peace within this Asia-Pacific region, but wider internationally. And so we very much encourage that, the role that India can play as one of the world's largest democracies. We've just had the elections here. It was a true education to see how a country with 1.4 billion people can go through a largely peaceful election process and come out the other side. So there's a lot that the world can learn from India. And so part of my job as a small country, but with a proud history with India, but is to increase that visibility, both within India and for the wider region, and to foster those kind of links. One little example I'll give is that we want to learn from the Indian Election Commission. Believe it or not, even though our country is slightly older than India, it was a few years, we got our independence from Britain before you, but we have just established an election commission in Ireland. So it's only a couple of years old. Okay. And so there's a lot I think we can learn from the Indian model here and to engage with them, and that's what we'd like to do.
So you mentioned about the European Union. Now India and the European Union have been in conversation for the FTA, which is now decades. I was in 10th when it started. It's still not completed. Yes. But what's your, essentially, the thought process, Ireland's thought process as to the FTA? Any guesses when the talks can be concluded? I know it's a difficult question in many senses. Nobody knows the exact answer. But if you can give us a sense as to where the conversation is going.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Ireland is a big supporter of free trade agreements. You know, when we joined the European Union in 1973, we were the poorest country in Europe. We're now the fastest growing economy. We're the second, probably wealthiest country, and that's because of free trade. That's because of being part of the European Union and benefiting from all the tariff-free access that can have. So we're a very strong supporter. When my minister was here earlier this year and he met with Indian counterparts, that was a strong part of his messaging about we want to see an EU-India free trade agreement. We think that it brings huge benefits, but these things are complicated. I know, like you said, it's taken a long time. I think we're on the 9th round of negotiations, but both sides are not giving up. I think Europe is still, EU is very committed. I read reports all the time from my colleagues in Brussels, and in each month in these meetings, there's updates in terms of what's happening with the EU FTA. So I'm very hopeful. I really think it'll bring both benefits for both sides in terms of access to the EU market, which is a highly sophisticated market, with very high standards and rules. And I think it's win-win on both sides. Of course, Europe also wants to engage with India because, everything is happening in this country. So there's real opportunities, I think, for that. But I can't give you an answer in terms of when. I wish I would say that it will happen this year, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time.
Hoping against hope, but now, so moving on the international bit, getting a sense of Ireland's view on various global concerns, issues, challenges. The first, of course, is the situation in West Asia. We have seen since the Hamas terror attack, situation has gone back to worse. What's your sense? Recently, we saw Ireland joining countries like Spain and Norway in recognizing Palestine. What's the idea behind this move?
Okay, well, there's always been traditionally a strong support for the Palestinian cause within Ireland. That's a strong grassroots movement, civil society organisations, and the government has reflected those views. That is not an anti-Israeli position. Our position has always been very principled and very clear. We don't see any solution to this conflict without a two-state solution where both sides are secured of their sovereignty and that they have safety. And what we have seen, unfortunately, in recent times with the horrific attack by Hamas, which is absolutely inexcusable, and the fact that today, and we're now almost approaching the year mark, where there are still hostages being held in Gaza. This can't continue.
The other big crisis is on your continent, which is the war that is underway. What is the position? I'm pretty sure that you are supporting the Ukrainians. But where do you see the solution in terms of the conflict? Because it cannot just continue like this. It has been having impacts not just in Europe but also in the global south in terms of high food, fuel and commodity prices.
Absolutely, and we're very, very conscious of that. In Ireland, I think that we're one of the highest recipients of Ukrainian refugees. I don't know what the final figure is now, but I think it's almost up at the range of 70 to 80,000 Ukrainians came to Ireland as a consequence. And we opened our doors, which, again, I'm very proud about because it shows that when people face an unjustified attack, which is what the Russian act of aggression, we don't call this a war between two countries. We call it an act of unprovoked aggression by Russia against Ukraine. And so Ireland has been absolutely clear from the very start that we condemn this war. And we condemn the attack by Russia on Ukraine. And so we have had quite a number of political visits between our leadership to Kyiv, and we have been very strong also in supporting Ukraine's bid to join the European Union. We're one of those countries in the EU strongly encouraging that. The solution will have to come, of course, like all solutions will have to come eventually through, a negotiation. But that does not mean that we can allow Russia to just be tolerated for its unprovoked attack. The Russian invasion needs to stop, and Ukraine needs to be returned, to the safety and security within its own borders, and hopefully that is the way forward.
At the time of these wars, conflicts, the UN has been found missing. There has been growing call for the reforms of the UN, especially the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council. India is keen to be member of the UNSC. So what's your position on UNSC reforms, India's keenness, aspiration to be at the high table?
We totally understand India's desire to be at the UN Security Council. Given the size of this country, now the most populous country on earth, of course we understand. We have also been a strong supporter of UN reform and the reform of the Security Council. Like you said, the UN has been largely, not that it's missing, but it's been hamstrung by the way it's structured. And you have Russia, one of the aggressors in this war on the European continent, sitting on the UN Security Council with a veto. So there are obvious problems. So Ireland is not in favour of the veto. Ireland has questions about how the UN Security Council is structured. Ireland believes that Africa should have a bigger role as well within the UN. We ourselves were on the UN Security Council. In fact, I was part of Ireland's campaign team to try to get Ireland elected onto it as a temporary member for 2 years. So we totally support India's right to be on the Security Council. But it is a Security Council that requires reform. And whether or not the answer is more permanent members or whether the answer is longer terms for members on the Security Council, for the bigger countries, maybe are on it for 10 years. These are very, very complex issues, and it'll be very difficult to resolve from the way. But having said all that, I'm not despondent about the United Nations. I think that it's still the most amazing creation. If we were to try to build it today, we would fail. There's no doubt about it. So we have to try to fix the United Nations and make it work. And that does require the kind of reform you're talking about.
So my last question, coming back to the bilateral aspect, there are many things both countries can learn from each other. One is the digital infrastructure that India is rapidly building, which India has been talking about. How do you see the Indian digital infrastructure which is being done? I mean, you see QR codes across the city now. You can pay, you can carry your mobile and just, you don't have to carry your wallet essentially. So how do you see that as, and any conversation on that bit between the two countries?
Well, again, back to this we mentioned earlier about this Joint Economic Commission. This is one of the themes that we would like to see opportunities for exploration. India is operating at such a huge scale. Ireland is a relatively small country. But the size of our economies, we still have a very huge economy. And the fact that, I think it's 5 of the top 7 tech companies have their headquarters for Europe and the Middle East based in Dublin. We have something to add to this. And so in the whole area of chips, in the whole area of artificial intelligence, there's a huge amount happening in Ireland, and there's real opportunities. But you're right, it's so impressive to see what's happening here. And in fact, India has leapfrogged over many other countries in terms of their ability to operate digital. Many people in very rural parts of India can get paid money and use their mobile phones. It's highly, highly impressive. So I think that it's another area where we could leverage an engagement and a partnership.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION, and it was lovely speaking to you, and we'll continue the conversation as both countries celebrate the 75th year of diplomatic relationship.
Absolutely, and I hope we'll see you or your cameras in Calcutta for the exciting spectacle.
Sir. Hopefully, yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Siddharth.
sir.
Thank you.